Hey everyone, Kuro and Violet here. Welcome to the third episode of 50 playable games on a Nintendo Switch emulator for Android. That means we've officially hit 150 playable games. How awesome is that?
Before we jump in, shout out to this comment mentioning that Dragon's Dogma experiences major FPS drops in open cities. So keep that in mind. Since we usually test games for about 10 to 15 minutes, we can't guarantee performance will stay the same throughout the entire game. Also, many of you requested games that run at perfect or near perfect speed, so this time, most of the games on the list will be running at full speed. For this episode, I tested these games on Citron Canary 0.4 and Sudachi 1.0.13. So let's see what's working this time. Alright, let's get started.
Freedom Wars. A fast-paced action RPG set in a dystopian future where humanity is imprisoned in massive cities called panopticons. Players take on the role of a prisoner fighting for their freedom by battling monstrous enemies and completing missions with a mix of melee and ranged combat. In my tests, the game delivered decent performance, with FPS staying stable most of the time, but fluctuating in certain areas. The gameplay itself feels smooth, and combat is responsive, but there are occasional dips that might be more noticeable in intense fights. However, I did encounter a crash once, which makes me suspect that crashes could become more frequent in later stages. If you're planning to play this game, I'd recommend using a device more powerful than mine to ensure better stability. Castlevania Order of Ecclesia, a side-scrolling action RPG in the classic Castlevania series. Players control Shanoa, a warrior wielding the powerful glyph system to fight Dracula's minions. The game emphasizes challenging combat, exploration, and RPG mechanics. Since this is originally a Nintendo DS title, it runs flawlessly even when upscaling the resolution. Given the DS's hardware limitations, that was expected, but what makes this version special is that it eliminates the need for dual-screen emulation. A lot of players avoid DS emulation because of the awkward split-screen setup, which is understandable, but that also means they're missing out on some amazing games, including this one. So, if you're one of those people, this version is the perfect way to experience it without dealing with the DS's dual screens. SHANTAE Half Genie Hero, a colorful and fast-paced platformer starring SHANTAE, a half-genie hero with magical transformation abilities. Featuring vibrant visuals, engaging level design, and Metroidvania-style exploration, this entry modernizes the beloved indie franchise. If you're into platformers with vibrant visuals, smooth gameplay, and fun transformations, you really should try this game. It's an absolute blast to play, and in terms of emulation, it runs flawlessly. However, it is not playable on Citron, so if you're using that emulator, you're out of luck. Instead, I'd recommend using Sudachi, where the game runs without any issues. Spyro the Dragon Remastered. A fully remastered version of the classic Spyro the Dragon game, featuring enhanced visuals, reworked controls, and updated music, while retaining the charm and fun platforming of the original. Players guide Spyro through various worlds, collecting gems, freeing dragons, and battling enemies. The game is playable, but you need a powerful device for smooth performance. On my Snapdragon 860, it only runs at half FPS, making the gameplay feel sluggish. Given how demanding this remaster is, I'd say you need at least a Snapdragon 888 or higher for proper emulation. If you have a weaker device, expect serious performance drops. Unpacking. A relaxing puzzle game about unpacking and organizing a character's belongings across different stages of life. With no dialogue, the game tells a touching and personal story through its minimalist gameplay and environmental storytelling. It's a chill, casual game that's great for those who enjoy cozy, meditative experiences. It's not really my type of game, but I can see why some players would love it. On the performance side, it runs at full FPS on my device, which means even lower-end devices should be able to handle it without any issues. If you're into relaxing puzzle games, this one's worth checking out. Castlevania Portrait of Ruin. A Castlevania adventure that introduces dual character mechanics, letting you switch between Jonathan Morris and Charlotte Allin to battle through Dracula's castle and its magical paintings. It blends fast-paced combat, RPG elements, and cooperative strategies for a fresh take on the classic formula. Since this is another Nintendo DS title, it runs flawlessly on emulation, no issues whatsoever. MEGAMAN Battle Network Legacy Collection. A compilation of the beloved Mega Man Battle Network RPG series, originally released on the Game Boy Advance. With grid-based strategic combat, a deep digital world story, and online multiplayer, this collection keeps the series alive for modern players. As expected for a GBA title, it runs flawlessly with no issues to report. You might notice that I didn't show settings in this video. That's because these games require minimal tweaking. However, when I use specific tricks or mods, I'll definitely cover the settings. By the way, if you're new to Switch emulation, I highly recommend watching my Switch emulator settings guide instead of just copying settings blindly. Understanding the emulator itself will help both you and the emulation community in the long run. Blasphemous. A brutal action platformer inspired by Dark Souls and Metroidvania games. You play as the penitent one, battling grotesque creatures and uncovering dark, tragic lore through fast-paced combat and exploration. It runs flawlessly in emulation, but I should mention that there's an official mobile port, which is the superior option for now if you want the smoothest experience. That said, I still wanted to test the Switch version, and it works without any problems. If you haven't played Blasphemous, it's a must-try, especially if you enjoy dark, punishing games. Corpse Party Blood Drive, a horror adventure that continues the chilling Corpse Party story. Featuring 3D environments, visual novel storytelling, and survival horror gameplay, you must navigate a haunted school while avoiding supernatural threats. In my testing, it ran at decent FPS, meaning even devices weaker than mine should handle it fine. Fatal Frame, a survival horror series where you use a camera to fight ghosts. You'll navigate haunted locations, solve mysteries, and exorcise spirits through the camera obscura, a unique gameplay mechanic that blends tension and puzzle solving. From what I tested, the game runs pretty decently. I haven't done a full playthrough yet, but performance seems stable so far. Since Fatal Frame relies more on slow, atmospheric gameplay, minor FPS drops might not affect the experience as much as they would in a fast-paced action game. If you like classic survival horror, it's worth trying.
Legend of Mana, a remastered version of the classic action RPG, originally released on the PlayStation. Legend of Mana features hand-painted backgrounds, refined visuals, and reorchestrated music, breathing new life into its beautifully crafted world. Unlike traditional RPGs, it offers a non-linear adventure, where players shape the world through the landmake system, creating towns, dungeons, and events as they progress. The game also features real-time combat, a charming cast of characters, and multiple story arcs, making it a standout entry in the Mana series. In terms of emulation, the game runs flawlessly with no performance issues. Since it's a remaster of an older title, it's not particularly demanding, meaning even mid-range devices should handle it without problems. Oceanhorn, a Zelda-inspired action-adventure that combines puzzle solving, dungeon exploration, and real-time combat. Players set sail across a beautifully designed world, uncovering secrets and battling enemies with a mix of swordplay and magic. The game draws clear inspiration from The Legend of Zelda, offering an engaging story, a memorable soundtrack, and varied gameplay. The game runs at full FPS, making it a great choice for lower-end devices as well. If you're a fan of action-adventure titles with light RPG elements, this one's worth checking out. Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz HD, a remastered version of Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz, featuring HD visuals, improved controls, and online leaderboards. Players guide a monkey inside a ball through tricky obstacle courses, aiming to reach the goal before time runs out. The game also includes a variety of mini-games and boss battles, adding more variety to the experience. Performance-wise, it runs decently on my device. While the core gameplay remains smooth, some sections may show minor FPS dips, particularly in levels that require precise movement. However, it remains fully playable, and higher-end devices should have no trouble running it at full speed. Team Sonic Racing, a high-speed kart racing game featuring Sonic and his friends, where teamwork plays a key role in victory. Players race across dynamic tracks, utilizing power-ups, boosting mechanics, and cooperative strategies to outpace their rivals. Unlike traditional kart racers, this game focuses on team-based mechanics, where helping teammates and sharing speed boosts can lead to victory. On my device, the game maintains playable FPS as much as I tested on some tracks, but I didn't test every track, so keep that in mind. This makes it a great alternative for those with similar specs, especially since Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has slowdown on my device, If you're looking for a fast-paced racing game that runs well, this is a solid choice. The Rumblefish 2, a 2D fighting game known for its smooth animations, deep mechanics, and strategic combat system. Originally released as an arcade fighter, this version brings modern improvements like widescreen support and enhanced visuals while keeping the fast-paced action intact. The game features a unique dual-gauge system, allowing for advanced combos and strategic playstyles. Performance-wise, it runs flawlessly, which is expected for a 2D fighter. Fighting games rely on stable FPS for precise inputs and reaction timing, and this one delivers a smooth experience with no issues. Dead Cells, a roguelike Metroidvania with fast-paced combat, procedural level generation, and a vast arsenal of weapons and abilities. Players must explore ever-changing dungeons, defeat enemies, and collect upgrades, all while facing permadeath, meaning each run starts from scratch. The game is known for its fluid movement, challenging difficulty, and rewarding combat mechanics. The game runs perfectly on emulation. That being said, Dead Cells also has an official mobile port, which is currently the better option in terms of optimization and touch controls. But if you prefer using a controller or just want to test the Switch version, it runs without any issues. Doraemon Dorayaki Shop, a casual simulation game where players help Doraemon run a dorayaki shop, serving customers and managing the business. The game features simple mechanics, colorful visuals, and a relaxing atmosphere, making it a great choice for casual gamers and fans of Doraemon. Performance-wise, it runs at full FPS, which I expected. It's lightweight, so even lower-end devices should be able to handle it without issues. If you enjoy lighthearted simulation games, this one is a fun little time waster. TOUHOU DANMAKU KAGURA Phantasia Lost, a rhythm game set in the TOUHOU universe, featuring a mix of bullet hell patterns and rhythm-based gameplay. Players tap, hold, and slide to the beat while dodging incoming projectiles, making it a unique challenge for rhythm game fans. In my testing, the game ran smoothly, though I'm not great at rhythm games, especially when using an Xbox layout controller for a Switch game. That said, rhythm games require stable FPS, and even minor drops can affect timing, so I'd recommend playing it on a device that can maintain full FPS. Soccer Story, a story-driven soccer RPG, blending open-world exploration, quests, and soccer-based battles. Players take on the role of a young soccer prodigy, venturing across the world to bring the sport back to life in a world where soccer has been banned. The game combines traditional RPG mechanics with casual soccer action, making it a unique and lighthearted experience. It runs at full FPS, making it fully playable on mid-range devices. Eternight, a hybrid of action RPG and dating sim, blending fast-paced combat with deep character interactions. Players fight through dungeons, build relationships, and make choices that affect the story. The game mixes romance, action, and post-apocalyptic themes, creating a unique experience. On my device, it runs decently in the combat sections, but FPS dips occur in certain areas. If you have similar specs to mine, you should be able to play it, but for a fully smooth experience, a high-end device is recommended.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate, a roguelike action game set in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles universe, where the turtles must battle through procedurally generated levels to rescue Master Splinter. In terms of emulation, the game runs well, maintaining smooth performance in most areas. However, there may be occasional frame drops during intense combat sequences, depending on your device. Soko Penguin, a charming puzzle game inspired by Sokoban, where you control a penguin pushing blocks to solve increasingly complex puzzles. Performance-wise, no surprises here. It runs flawlessly. You might overlook this game due to its simple graphics, but trust me, it's genuinely fun. 6-Star Gate Star Rail. The game runs perfectly in emulation, maintaining stable FPS throughout. It's a great pick if you're looking for something visually unique with simple but engaging gameplay. Gunbolt Chronicles Luminous Avenger IX2. A fast-paced 2D platformer from the Gunbolt series, reminiscent of MEGAMAN Zero, featuring fluid movement, stylish abilities, and high-speed action. Performance-wise, the game runs at full speed, delivering consistent FPS even during chaotic battles. Since precision is key in games like this, smooth performance makes all the difference. If you're a fan of high-speed action platformers, this is a must-play. Fueled Up, a cooperative spaceship repair game where players must fix, refuel, and maintain their ship while solving puzzles under pressure. Think of it as Overcooked, but in space. Performance-wise, it runs decently, averaging around 26 FPS. It feels a little clunky at times, but it's still very playable. Pizza Tower, a high-energy 2D platformer heavily inspired by Wario Land, featuring frantic gameplay, wacky animations, and creative level design. The game runs flawlessly at 60 FPS, keeping the momentum-based gameplay smooth. NEPTUNIA x SENRAN KAGURA Ninja Wars, a hack-and-slash crossover bringing together characters from NEPTUNIA and SENRAN KAGURA, blending fast combat with RPG mechanics. Performance-wise, the game runs smoothly, but later stages with lots of enemies and effects might see some FPS dips. If you're a fan of either series, or just enjoy anime-style action RPGs, this one's a no-brainer. Plus, it's a SENRAN KAGURA game, so you already know what to expect. Kirby's Dream Buffet, a lighthearted multiplayer party game where Kirby rolls around collecting strawberries to grow bigger while competing against others in racing and minigames. It's all about chaotic fun with adorable visuals. The game runs smoothly in emulation, but you might experience minor slowdowns depending on your device, especially in multiplayer or high-action moments. Metal Slug Attack Reloaded, a strategy-based take on the Metal Slug series, where players deploy units in side-scrolling battles, capturing bases and completing missions. Performance-wise, the game runs flawlessly, which isn't surprising given its simple 2D visuals. While it's a departure from the traditional Metal Slug formula, it's still a fun experiment for fans of the series, especially if you enjoy tower defense-style games. By the way, if you're loving this so far, make sure to subscribe to my channel. These videos take a lot of time. For example, I tested nearly 80 games for this video, but I carefully picked these 50 to showcase the best ones. Your support helps me keep making content like this. Now, let's get to the video. Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow. In emulation, the game runs perfectly with no performance issues. The DS touchscreen mechanics, like the magic seal system, can be easily mapped to buttons or virtual controls, making it fully playable. If you enjoy Metroidvania-style action RPGs, Dawn of Sorrow is a must-play classic. And honestly, just play every Castlevania game, because they're all amazing.
Gimmick 2, a sequel to the cult classic NES platformer Gimmick. This game retains its retro charm with tight platforming, physics-based mechanics, and creative level design. It feels like a love letter to old-school platformers while adding modern polish. In emulation, it runs flawlessly with stable FPS and no major issues. Crypt Custodian, a Metroidvania where you play as a mischievous ghost cat exploring a crypt, solving puzzles, and battling spectral enemies. The game stands out with its charming hand-drawn art style and smooth combat, blending action and exploration seamlessly. Performance-wise, it runs smoothly with no major issues. Cat Quest 3, the third entry in the beloved Cat Quest series, continues its mix of open-world RPG mechanics, real-time combat, and of course, endless cat puns. It runs perfectly in emulation, maintaining the series' signature smooth performance. If you like the previous Cat Quest games, this one expands on everything that made them fun. Bakeru, an action-adventure game where you travel across Japan's 47 prefectures to free the country from evil spirits. It feels like a spiritual successor to Ganbaregomon on the N64, another fantastic game you should try. In emulation, it runs smoothly on my Xiaomi Pad 5, delivering a great experience without any noticeable slowdowns. For the Elements, a fast-paced action game built around elemental combat, letting players switch between fire, water, earth, and air abilities to defeat enemies and solve puzzles. Mastering these elements adds depth to both combat and exploration. Performance is solid in emulation, with smooth gameplay even during intense sequences. G.I. Joe Wrath of Cobra, a side-scrolling beat-em-up featuring classic G.I. Joe characters, capturing the feel of old-school arcade brawlers, while adding modern visuals and gameplay tweaks. Packed with nostalgia and action, it's a throwback to the golden age of beat-em-ups. It runs flawlessly in emulation, maintaining smooth combat throughout. Shadows of the Damned, Remastered, a remaster of the cult classic action horror game by Suda51 and Shinji Mikami. It blends third-person shooting with a twisted, dark-humored narrative as you fight through hell to rescue your girlfriend. Surprisingly, It runs well in emulation, something I honestly didn't expect. If you never played the original, this is the best way to experience its weird, over-the-top action. American Fugitive, a top-down open-world action game inspired by classic GTA titles, where you break out of prison and set out for revenge. Expect car chases, heists, and chaotic shootouts, all set in a destructible environment. It emulates smoothly, making it a great pick if you enjoy GTA-style sandbox games with an indie twist. As Libra Revision, Garden, an expansion to the critically acclaimed As Libra Revision, a deep and story-driven Metroidvania RPG with an intense combat system and gorgeous hand-drawn visuals. This update adds new content, bosses, and challenges to an already excellent game. Performance-wise, it runs flawlessly, keeping up with the fast-paced action. Dreadout Remastered, a modern remake of Dreadout, the Indonesian horror game inspired by Fatal Frame, where you use a camera to battle ghosts. The remaster enhances visuals, improves controls, and refines the overall experience while keeping its eerie atmosphere intact. In emulation, it runs smoothly as far as I tested, though lighting-heavy areas might cause slight slowdowns later. If you enjoy psychological horror and Southeast Asian folklore, this one will definitely get under your skin.
Blazing Strike, a retro-inspired 2D fighting game that pays homage to classic arcade fighters like Street Fighter III and The King of Fighters. With pixel art visuals, fluid animations, and deep yet accessible mechanics, it's a must-try for fighting game fans. In emulation, it runs smoothly with no major issues. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, a beloved RPG with a unique paper-themed art style, witty dialogue, and turn-based combat mixed with action commands. It's widely considered one of the best Paper Mario games, thanks to its charming story and engaging gameplay. Performance-wise, it runs full FPS in combat sections, but averages around 20 to 26 FPS in normal gameplay, making it feel clunky. I recommend playing the GameCube version on Dolphin instead, especially if you don't have a high-end device. River City Saga: Three Kingdoms Next, a beat-em-up that merges Kunio-kun's brawling gameplay with the Three Kingdoms setting. It offers chaotic battles, RPG mechanics, and the signature humor of the River City series. The game runs at full speed in emulation, keeping up with the fast-paced action. If you enjoy classic River City games with a fresh twist, this one's a fun ride. Robbie Reeby Platinum Edition, a Metroidvania that mixes bullet hell action with platforming, featuring a bunny girl protagonist battling through vibrant levels. The Platinum Edition includes all DLC, adding even more content to an already deep game. Performance-wise, it runs at full speed, maintaining stable FPS even in intense bullet hell segments. If you're into Metroidvania games with a unique twist, this is highly recommended. Code of Princess EX, a side-scrolling action RPG with hack-and-slash combat, featuring a mix of beat-em-up and RPG mechanics. Originally developed as a spiritual successor to Guardian Heroes, it offers co-op play and a large cast of characters. In emulation, it runs at full speed, keeping combat smooth and responsive. If you love action RPGs with classic arcade-style gameplay, this is a solid pick. Tevi. This is one of those games I ended up playing for hours while testing. It's just that good. If you love Metroidvania games like me, this one's a gem. To put it simply, Tevi is a Metroidvania with waifu characters. Think TOUHOU meets Hollow Knight with a colorful anime-inspired aesthetic. Performance-wise, it runs at full speed in emulation, keeping the action smooth even in hectic fights. Ys Memoir: The Oath in Felghana, a remastered version of Ys The Oath in Felghana, one of the best action RPGs in the Ys series. It features fast, skill-based combat, a great soundtrack, and a refined story centered on Adal's adventure in Felghana. It runs perfectly in emulation, delivering stable performance throughout. Guilty Gear Strive. One of the best modern fighting games, Guilty Gear Strive brings stunning visuals, deep mechanics, and smooth online play with rollback netcode. It's both beginner-friendly and rewarding for hardcore players. In emulation, my experience was mixed. Some areas run perfectly, while others have significant slowdowns. There's no average FPS, it's either smooth or outright unplayable depending on the scene. I'd only recommend this if your device is more powerful than mine. Pulling no punches. a hand-drawn beat-em-up with brutal combat and social satire featuring exaggerated, over-the-top brawling mechanics. If you love classic arcade beat-em-ups like Final Fight, this one offers a fresh, chaotic experience. It runs at full FPS in emulation with no major issues. If you're into hard-hitting, stylized beat-em-ups, Pulling No Punches delivers both action and humor. And the 150th playable game is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This game needs no introduction. Everyone knows it's one of the best open-world games ever made. But before we talk about performance, let's be realistic. If your device has anything lower than a Snapdragon 860 or 855 with less than 6GB RAM, don't bother testing. I always encourage testing, but in this case, it's just not worth the frustration. If you're desperate to play, you'll need a more powerful device. For Snapdragon 860 and similar tier devices, it's playable, but not ideal. You'll face slowdowns and inconsistent performance. In my tests, dungeons ran at a full 30 FPS with minor, tolerable glitches. In some open-world areas, like a certain tower, I got a decent 25 to 30 FPS, but in places like the starting cave, performance tanked. And after about 30 minutes of gameplay, FPS drops became frequent. So unless you're really dying to play it, I wouldn't recommend it for mid-range devices. High-end hardware, though, should handle it fine. For the people who desperately want to play it, here are some settings I call the last resort. These settings can help squeeze out extra FPS. 1. Install the game update. This is mandatory for better performance. Without it, the game runs in JIT mode, but after installing the update, it switches to NCE mode, which significantly boosts performance. I'm not sure why, but it works. 2. Lower the resolution to 0.25x. This drastically boosts FPS, but the game will look blurry, so much so that text may become unreadable. To balance this, increase the sharpness, which demands less power than increasing resolution. This is my last resort setting when I really need extra performance in demanding games. I tested both Citron and Sudachi, and while the FPS counter showed similar numbers, Citron felt smoother in actual gameplay. That said, I highly recommend testing on both, because I've seen people report different results depending on their device. Some forks work better for certain games, and performance varies across different specs. There's no definitive best or worst emulator. It all depends on the game and your hardware. Maybe someday, I'll make a dedicated video with full proof.
And that wraps up 150 playable games on Nintendo Switch emulators for Android. What did you think of this video? If you have any feedback, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you missed our previous videos on other playable games, be sure to check them out here. And if you want a deeper understanding of the Yuzu emulator, which we highly recommend, watch this video. Thanks for watching. This is Violet and Kuro, signing off.